The last time we saw the Incredible Hulk, he decided to sign with the Tulane Green Wave, where he went on to annihilate the competition. Bruce Banner had become the #1 problem for every offense he faced, just absolutely destroying quarterbacks all season long and having himself such an incredible season that he went on to become the best defensive player in college football history, putting up a national career record 55 sacks in one season, and doing so on his way to leading his team to the college football playoffs. For against Texas Tech, Tulane did let up a touchdown, but unfortunately that was all that was needed for them to lose in the first round. So the Hulk didn't get to compete for a national championship, but he knows he has one more season before Nick Fury needs him to join his team in the NFL. Which brings us to today, where the Hulk is definitely feeling good after having a season where he broke the national career record for sacks in 1 year. But he is not feeling too good about being a part of Tulane, because that offense had unfortunately let him down by the end of the season. So he decided that he's going to hit the transfer portal and pick a new team. And after looking at some programs that have colors that he wants to wear, for his sophomore season, Bruce Banner would ultimately decide to sign with the Michigan State Spartans. And now that the Incredible Hulk is with Michigan State, he is locked in heading into his sophomore season. The Spartan coaches realize that they want to use him a little bit different though heading into his next year. They're still going to have him play defensive line, but they want to see how he plays coming off the edge. So they're looking forward to trying that out heading into the first game of the year, where Michigan State will be on the road facing off against the top 25 team in the nation, the 20th ranked Boise State Broncos. Now it did not take long into this game for the Hulk to come up with his first sack as a Spartan. He was making an impact for his team early, and he already had this Boise State quarterback petrified. But Bruce Banner knew that this was only just the beginning, because this Michigan State defense would have the Broncos locked up all throughout the first half, bringing us to a 1st down and 10 where Boise State was looking to take a shot downfield, but this pass was tipped and intercepted by the Incredible Hulk. Bruce Banner was heading to the end zone for his first touchdown of his college football career. This is also what I believe is his first interception, and it couldn't have come in a better way, because just like that, the Hulk has already put an end to this game. Michigan State starts the season 1-0, taking down the Broncos 24-6. And they were led by a great performance from the Incredible Hulk, who put up 3 sacks and a touchdown. He was already playing well enough to earn himself a conference and national offensive player of the week. He was hoping that by the end of the year he might be able to earn himself a Heisman Trophy, but he knew a good way of doing that would be by potentially getting some help. So he decided that he's going to go ahead and recruit one of his friends who he wanted to join the team, but it turns out that his buddy Thor Odinson was not doing too well. He was still grieving from his brother Loki dying for the 17th time. So for now, it seems like Hulk is not going to be able to get Thor on the team, but you know what, he's still ready to move his team to 2-0 heading into the first home game of the year. He feels like with Thor, they could become the greatest defense of all time. But even without Thor, they'll definitely be just fine, especially against their next opponent, as Michigan State is getting set to face off against FCS Northwest. Now going into a game where the Hulk was facing much worse competition than he had faced the previous week, this one definitely seemed like a cakewalk for him early on. He had about 6 tackles for loss by the 4th quarter, but he still was not done yet, because in a game where FCS Northwest still had a chance to win it by the end, Bruce had to take it upon himself to get home for a safety, giving the ball back to his offense with less than 2 minutes left, and officially doing enough to move the Spartans to 2-0 on the year. Michigan State was elated after signing the greatest defensive player of all time, because he was definitely showing up big, coming up with 8 tackles for loss and 4 sacks in a performance that helped his team get the win. But by week 3, it turns out that the Incredible Hulk would not be the only big signing for the Spartans this season, because I don't know where one of the Hulk's old friends had finally come around, as Thor Odinson had decided to join the team. And this is actually the perfect time for Thor to be joining the squad, because they're about to face off against one of the tougher teams on their schedule, with Michigan State looking to take down the 19th ranked Georgia Bulldogs. Now to start this game off, this Georgia offense was embarrassing the Spartans, coming up with a huge play that went for a touchdown on the opening drive, the first one allowed by this Michigan State defense all season. By the 2nd quarter though, this defense would start picking it up as they get their first sack of the day, making a big play on 3rd down that brings us to less than 2 minutes left, where the Hulk is finally making an impact. He might have just gave this quarterback early onset dementia, but you know what, at least they get a stop on 3rd down. And now out of nowhere, it seems like this momentum was swinging towards Michigan State's way, because in the 3rd quarter, the Hulk comes up with his first sack of the game, pretty much derailing a drive that would keep this one at 14-7 by the 4th quarter. And at this point, the Hulk was really starting to take over, man. He even thought that he might be dreaming or something. Or I don't know, maybe he had too much gamma radiation or something, because he couldn't believe that he was doing this against the top team. Unfortunately, though, Georgia would prove that they were definitely that good, because by the end of this game, they were driving downfield and had a chance to come up with a win, but Thor was actually in there to help come up with the stop with 5 seconds left. And although the clock was stopped, the Bulldogs could not get set in time, and Michigan State would just barely win this game. This could have definitely been a bad loss for Michigan State, but they find a way to get it done. And they were thankful for their star defensive tackle who had 4 tackles for loss. You know, man, Thor was he was definitely coming along, but they would need him to improve going into the next game. Because the Hulk felt like this defense had a chance to become one of the greatest defenses of all time. But the only way to do that would be by staying locked in and helping the team stay undefeated heading into the next game against Rutgers. Now, unfortunately, on this opening drive, Rutgers was driving on this Michigan State defense. Luckily, they would get pushed to a 3rd and goal, though, where the Hulk helps combine for a sack, holding Rutgers to 3 points by the end of the 3rd quarter. Or on another drive where Rutgers was finally starting to get things going, the Hulk would make a big mistake that would allow them a chance to get into scoring range. So out of nowhere, man, Bruce Banner knew that he had to make up for that for his team, so he just pushed this lineman back all the way to the QB and got home for a sack. The Incredible Hulk just absolutely dominated this right guard, but it turns out he wasn't done yet, because on the very next play, Bruce was pushing him back for another sack that puts Rutgers at 4th down and 29. And at this point, the game is definitely on the line, so Rutgers needs to make something happen, but Thor Odinson was there to come up with the stop. Michigan State was holding Rutgers on this final possession and officially moving to 4-0 on the year. This team was feeling great after a game where the Hulk had 4 sacks, but this was not the only team he was a part of, as one day he was actually out on a mission, and oh yeah, man, Hulk was looking to stop somebody from taking over the world. Because it turns out that there was this one dude named Ultron, and oh yep, no, Hulk knew he had to jump up there and grab him and smack him around. This man Hulk thought he just took out Ultron for good, and he was ready to jump into the next game of the season. The Incredible Hulk is heading into Washington, where they will be facing off against a team that no longer has the Black Panther. So Bruce thinks this might be an easy one, as they're looking to take down the Washington Huskies. And it turns out early on, this game was looking pretty easy. The Hulk was just demolishing this right tackle, and there was just no way to guard him, because even when he wasn't using his strength, oftentimes he was way too fast. It wouldn't be to the end of the game where Washington did have a chance to put up some points, but they could not come up with a completion, and Michigan State would come up with a shutout on the road. The Spartans were absolutely on a roll now that they moved to 5-0 on the year, and they were looking to move to 6-0 as they were heading on the road to face off against Northwestern, where Bruce and the rest of his defense was just dominating all day. There was nothing Northwestern can do, as the Incredible Hulk was just annihilating this offensive line and continuously smashing this quarterback in the backfield. So there was really nothing they can do as the Spartans improved to 6-0 on the year. The Spartans get the job done on the road thanks to a 5.5 sack game from the Incredible Hulk. This man was dominating teams even in a tougher conference. And the crazy thing is, man, he's only halfway through the regular season and he's already broken the single season record for sacks at Michigan State. That is absolutely insane, and on top of that, this defense has yet to let up 10 points on the year so far. They were legitimately looking like one of the greatest defenses in college football history, but as great as that was, it was even greater for Bruce to hear from Natasha Romanoff, who it turns out is actually going to be in attendance for Bruce's next game. So yeah, now Bruce got to be locked in heading into this one. And not just for Natasha, because they will easily be heading into the toughest matchup on their schedule. Michigan State is heading on the road to face off against a top 3 team in the nation and the #1 team in the Big Ten, the Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, early on in this game, this Ohio State offense was frying up Michigan State, getting themselves into scoring position, and unfortunately, the Hulk could not make a play, allowing the running back to run up the middle for an easy touchdown in the first half. So things are not looking good for the Spartans as they're still down in the second half, but on 2nd and 14, the Hulk was finally making some big plays, getting in the backfield for his first sack of the afternoon that would ultimately derail this Buckeye drive, bringing us to the 4th quarter where Michigan State finally takes the lead, and now all this defense has to do is just find a way to come up with a stop. Michigan State is picking this pass off, and they have an opportunity to take this one back to the crib before being brought down inside the 3-yard line. And at this point, the momentum has completely shifted towards the Spartans' side, because by the end of this game, this defense was completely fired up. They got to a 2nd down and 17 where the quarterback almost makes a big play, but he ends up fumbling the ball, but after it gets picked up by a lineman, they would end up getting stopped, and this would end up as a 3rd down and 43. But would you believe me if I told you it was about to get even worse, because the Hulk would come up with a sack to push them to 4th down and 50. Ohio State needed nothing short of a miracle, but that was not happening today, because after another sack from the Incredible Hulk, Michigan State moves to 7-0 on the year. This defense has still not let up more than 10 points, and it was mostly thanks to another performance where the Hulk went for 5 tackles for loss and 3 sacks. He was dominating even against some of the best teams in the nation, which is why soon Michigan State would also be ranked as one of the best teams in the nation. And at this point in the season, man, the Hulk had 42 total tackles, and 38 of them were tackles for loss. On top of that, he had 23.5 sacks and 1 interception, and it's crazy to think that he's still only 7 games into the year. But one thing that's definitely better than going 7-0 is going 8-0. Which is exactly what Michigan State was looking to do as they were heading into their next game, but they would be facing off against another Big Ten opponent in the Wisconsin Badgers. Now this was a game where Thor Odinson really wanted to start making an impact for this team, but he knew that all began with the Hulk. And that's exactly why Bruce was coming up with a sack on their first play of the game. This defense already looked locked in early on, as on 3rd down and 15, it was Thor coming up with a tackle to force Wisconsin a punt, bringing us to a 3rd down and 23 where the Badgers were already looking bad enough. But it was about to get even worse after their quarterback fumbled the ball, and Bruce Banner was picking it up, and he was taking us from the distance for a touchdown, baby! The Incredible Hulk gets into the end zone for his 2nd touchdown of the season, coming up with a big play that got the entire crowd cheering his name. And honestly, I think they're hyped because they know that this was only just the beginning for Michigan State. Because the Spartans would not only win this game, but they would eventually move to 10-0 on the season. They were just tearing teams apart almost every week. And they were looking to keep doing that as they were heading on the road against Purdue, where at this point the coaches decided to experiment with both Thor and Hulk on the line, and this had the quarterback throwing up some ridiculous passes. It turns out that these two right next to each other were an absolute force to be reckoned with, and Purdue would have to learn the hard way that leaving their linemen on an island against those two is probably not a good idea. But as Thor was out here growing into a better player, this defense overall was growing into a better defense. And by the end of this one, they were just dominating Purdue to move to 11-0 on the year. Thor Odinson and the Incredible Hulk were becoming a major force to be reckoned with. But honestly, the Hulk knew that this could always happen as he ends up breaking the career sack record at Michigan State. The Hulk at this point is already a legend in college football. And although he's really only here to prepare for an upcoming mission with Nick Fury, he still wants to do everything he can to compete for a national championship. Now, unsurprisingly, early on in this one, the Hulk was obliterating this quarterback on 3rd down, forcing Penn State to punt and giving the Spartans a ton of momentum, but unfortunately they would actually turn the ball over on their offensive possession, giving Penn State to put up some points here early on, but on 3rd down they would end up getting sacked. So this defense makes a big play to hold Penn State to a field goal before the 3rd quarter, where at this point the Nittany Lions get to another 3rd down where they end up getting stopped again by Thor Odinson. And although Penn State was able to put up 3 more points, out of nowhere it seemed like their offense just could not get anything done, as this defense just continued to come up with some big plays, repeatedly applying major pressure on the quarterback, eventually forcing him to fumble. And with all the momentum being on Michigan State's side, it was really no surprise to anyone that they would end up moving on to 12-0 on the year. Michigan State was having one of the best seasons in their program history as they move on into the Big Ten championship. They were a top 10 ranked team in the nation with an opportunity to make it to the college football playoffs. But they knew that there was definitely still more work to do, especially now that they were heading into the biggest game of their season, and they knew in order to punch their ticket they would have to lock in and find a way to take down the UCLA Bruins. Now, Michigan State felt like this might be a tough one early on, but it turns out that Hulk and Thor were combining for a sack. These two were already making some big plays in the 1st quarter, and rightfully so, it had Thor feeling good.
I am mighty.
And by the 2nd quarter, even though UCLA got the ball in great field position after a turnover, the Bruins could still not find a way to stop the Hulk, who was sacking them on 3rd down. Bringing us to the 2nd half, where although Michigan State is only up by a possession, they seem to have all the control, especially after a 3rd down where Thor and Hulk sacked the quarterback, forcing him to fumble and allowing one of their teammates to pick it up in the end zone for a touchdown. These two were a dynamic duo on defense. They found a way to come up with a miraculous play that put Michigan State up by 17 points in this game. And it turns out that this play alone would have already been enough to send this team to the college football playoffs. Michigan State holds another opponent under 10 points on the season, and they earn the right to call themselves the Big Ten champions, mostly because of performances by Thor Odinson and the Incredible Hulk. These two combined for 13 tackles for loss to punch their ticket to the college football playoffs. Unfortunately though, by the end of the season, it turns out that the Hulk would not win the Heisman Trophy. He somehow was snubbed again after a year where he put up 39 sacks and 63 tackles for loss. The Hulk was easily the most dominant player in college football, and at the very least he was getting a lot of respect, becoming a back-to-back Chuck Bednarik, Bronco Nagurski, and Lombardi Award winner, and pretty firmly establishing himself as the greatest defensive player in college football history. So at this point everything seemed to be going great for the Hulk until he would find out that Natasha was on a mission before she ran into Thanos. And I don't know where Thanos decided to throw her off the edge of a cliff, and oh no, Thanos killed the Black Widow. And when Bruce Banner found out, he was absolutely distraught. He had no idea how he was going to recover from this one. But soon it was time for him to head into the college football playoffs, where he had to get his shit together and help his team lock in for their next game. At this point, man, Bruce wanted to win it all for Natasha. So he was going to do everything he could to make that happen as he was heading into his next game against Pittsburgh. Now this Spartan defense was absolutely dominating early on, so they were definitely doing their part, but it turns out the offense was not, because they allowed Pittsburgh to score off a pick six. So the Hulk in this defense had to come out here and lock in, and as Pittsburgh got pushed to a 3rd down and long, all the momentum started to swing towards Michigan State's side, because by the start of the 4th quarter, Pittsburgh still only had 7 points, and the Hulk and Thor were out here combining for a sack. This defense was proving to be just way too much for Pittsburgh, and by the end of this one, on a 4th down and 18, it was actually Thor who was coming up with the sack, putting an end to this Pittsburgh drive and helping the Spartans move on to the next round of the playoffs. Michigan State was heading into the 2nd round largely thanks to a big game from not only Thor, but the Hulk did have 5 sacks, breaking a Big Ten career record on his way into a matchup against the #1 team in the nation. But the crazy thing about Auburn is that apparently they actually got better. As it turns out, they just brought in a new recruit called the Abomination. I don't know, bro. He looked pretty good, bro. I don't know. Luckily, he plays on the defensive side of the ball, so hopefully he won't be too much of a problem for this offense. But even if he is, Michigan State will have to find a way to get it done. And if they want any chance of potentially getting to the national championship, they're going to have to take care of business against the Auburn Tigers. Now, early on in a game against the #1 team in the nation, it turns out that both Thor Odinson and the Hulk were coming up with some big plays. They helped keep this game at 0-0 throughout the first half, and it was looking real tough for this Auburn offense, especially when Thor Odinson was forcing a fumble when the Hulk was not on the field. It wouldn't be till the 2nd half where Michigan State would finally take the lead, but it was actually at this point where the Abomination was in the game. He was here on a 3rd down and 1 where he helped his quarterback get the 1st down. And even though he didn't do much on this play, he was still jumping over Thor just to assert his dominance. And it definitely seemed like he was dominating on defense, as Michigan State only had 3 points by the 3rd quarter. But it turns out this Spartan defense was playing just a little bit better, because Thor and the Hulk just continued to make plays all throughout the 2nd half. Bruce even came out here and forced a fumble that probably should have resulted in a safety. But you know what, man, it was actually all good, because on the very next play, Bruce was getting home for a sack, coming up with a safety in the biggest moment of the game, and giving his team the ball back with 1 minute left to officially send the Spartans to the next round. Michigan State takes down the #1 team in the country 5-0. And I think it probably goes without saying, but they absolutely could not have got it done without their defense. It is crazy that they had to hold the Tigers to 0 points just to even have a chance in this game. But I think it's pretty reasonable since the offense had to face off against the Abomination, who did have a pretty good game, but not as good as the Incredible Hulk or Thor Odinson, who in the biggest game of the year goes on to win a Big Ten and National Defensive Player of the Week, helping the Spartans take care of business in the Sugar Bowl, but now they're going to have to do it again in the Orange Bowl, where it turns out that their next opponent actually got a new quarterback recently. They were heading into the playoffs starting a guy named Ultron, the same dude that the Hulk thought he had taken out earlier in the season. Oh nah, see now Bruce knows this is going to be a tough matchup, but in order to make it to the national championship, the Hulk is going to have to take down Ultron in the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now early on in this game, Alabama was absolutely frying this defense. It seemed like there was a chance that they could put up a bunch of points in this game, as they quickly got themselves down into scoring position. Eventually though, on a 3rd down and 8, the Hulk was wrecking this offensive line, and he was getting to Ultron for a sack, making a big play on this opening drive that forces Alabama to settle for 3. Bringing us to the 2nd quarter, where this defense seemed to have momentum on their side as they came up with a stop on 3rd down. So it was looking good for Michigan State at this point before the offense would turn the ball over immediately. And now Alabama has the ball at the goal line and they get a touchdown. Officially the first time all season where Michigan State let up 10 points. So it's not looking good for Michigan State, and it doesn't really look too much better heading into the 2nd half. Eventually though, on a 3rd down and goal, this defense would find a way to come up with the stop and hold Alabama to 3. Putting them in a position where they're still only down by 2 possessions, bringing us to a play on 1st down where the Hulk is being blocked by Casper, but it was all good because Thor would come up with a pick. Thor Odinson, the god of thunder, was making a big play to bring his team back in this game. This interception allows Michigan State to cut this deficit down to 1 possession. But now all they have to do is just come up with some stops. But it seems like Ultron actually has some other plans, because he finds a receiver who brings this ball well across the 50 into scoring range. It seemed like Ultron knew exactly how to defeat the Hulk, because on 2nd down and 6, he would quickly get the ball out to the other side of the field, and this receiver was able to take this one to the end zone for another touchdown, putting Alabama up by 3 possessions with 2 minutes left. And unfortunately, this would officially put an end to the Incredible Hulk's sophomore season. The Spartans would fall to the Crimson Tide 20-6, giving up the most points that they've let up all season to a quarterback who went for 94% completion percentage, really 95%. Ultron had diced his defense up in a performance where both the Hulk and Thor could have played better. They were definitely proud about how they played throughout the season though, as they both put up some incredible numbers. I mean, the Hulk almost had another 50 sack season and went on to have 63 tackles for loss. So that was definitely some good news, but the bad news is that Ultron would go on to win the national championship. And it turns out that he was being recruited by Thanos and Darkseid, who were on a mission to destroy football across the entire multiverse. And at this point, man, especially after Thanos had killed Natasha Romanoff, the Hulk was ready to move up into the big leagues. The Hulk told Nick Fury that he might spend 1 more year in college football, but he was ready to move on and head to the NFL. And if that's something you want to see, be sure to get this video to 1,000 likes and subscribe to the channel down below. Also be sure to comment down below who else you guys want to see next, and YouTube thinks you'll like one of these other stories until the next one comes out. If you got to this point in the video, just know that I appreciate you more than you'll ever know. I hope you all have a great weekend, and other than that, I'm gonna catch you guys next time.